Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, Billy Brandt, a.k.a. Big Shot Bill. On this week's episode, we're going to answer your fan questions as submitted to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. And we will also recap this past weekend's card from Fox Sports 1 in Saskatoon, Canada, UFC Fight Night 74. 6 fights were shown on the main card of that one Sunday night on Fox Sports 1. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, Billy Brandt. And how's it going today, Billy?
Good. A little cold, but feeling good.
All right. Let's see. I'm going to leave it up to you. Do you want to do fan questions first, or do you want to recap this weekend's fight card?
Let's clear out the fight card first, and we can get into some fan questions.
All right, let's get to the recap here. UFC Fight Night Saskatoon, the first time the UFC invaded the province of Saskatchewan. As I mentioned, 6 fights on the main card. But before we get to that, Billy, we got to talk about one thing that was very interesting. Frankie Perez, who had fought in the UFC previously, he took on longtime UFC veteran Sam Hands of Stone Stout, and Frankie Perez was able to knock him out in the first round. And while getting interviewed by John Ankin, Frankie Perez, only 26 years old, I believe this was his second fight in the UFC, maybe third, but his first win, decides that he's going to retire after this win. He said that he's not going to get a bigger win than this and decides to retire at 26 years old. A lot of people criticizing him one way or the other for this. I think it's very interesting. Don't get me wrong. Beating Sam Stout in his home country, knocking him out in the first round is very impressive. But I'm 26 years old, and if I got my first win in the UFC, my first thought wouldn't be to retire. I think if I made it that far, I at least try it out for a little more, see what I can do. And I know it's a grind and whatnot, but you've already dedicated so much of your life up until that point. I feel like that's a lot of work and effort to kind of just give it up that soon, in my opinion.
Yeah, but you never know a situation, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into it when you're coming out with head trauma and everything, and maybe he just found out it wasn't for him after he got so far and realized that there's other things he could pursue. Either way, I hope the best for him.
Well, if anything, you would think Sam Stout should retire. He's now been knocked out once again in the first round, and I don't know. I don't think he has much left either. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear Sam Stout retiring soon because, he was a guy that not only, could hit hard, knock you out, good crisp striking, but now he's getting knocked out himself. It's not a good sign for him. And yeah, he's a younger guy, but he's fought a lot. If you look at his MMA, and then also he had, I believe, a lot of boxing and kickboxing experience before. This guy's fought a lot in his career. And I think that all of those fights, Billy, are starting to take a toll on Mr. Sam Stout.
Yeah, for sure. He should maybe take a little note from Prez. Another thing is about Prez, he's so young that I'm not even sure he'll really retire. He might take a year off and realize, you know what, maybe I did have something and come back. So we'll see.
Let's get to the first fight of the evening for the main card, women's strawweight division, Valerie Letourneau against Marina Moroz. Big matchup here in the women's strawweight division. Looking at this fight, Billy, I thought this was a very close fight. I think it really went to the third round to who kind of wanted it more. And in the end, I agreed with the judges who gave the unanimous decision to the French-Canadian Valerie Letourneau. Looking at the stats, she was able to outstrike the Ukrainian 106-79. She was also successful on her only takedown attempt that came in the third round. And the first round, Moroz came out, a lot of pressure, very similar to what she did against Calderwood. But then she got tagged by a huge right hand by Letourneau that led to a knockdown. Letourneau controlled the majority of that first round on top. Didn't do a lot of damage, but definitely controlled before releasing back up. In the second round, I thought Moroz definitely won that round. I think, she definitely had the hand speed advantage in this fight. Letourneau was doing a good job countering, much like she did in the first round, but Moroz was able to land a little more, would have gave her that second round. I really thought the third round was a toss-up. I mean, looking at the stats, Letourneau only outstruck Moroz by 2. That round was very close up until that takedown by Letourneau, and I think that takedown and another kind of big right hand in that round, you saw Rock Moroz, I think, swayed the judges to give her that third round, ultimately giving her the fight. But this is a big win for Letourneau. She's now 3-0 in the strawweight division, and she beats a top 10 ranked Moroz, who was coming off a lot of momentum, huge upset of Calderwood. Like I said, Letourneau now puts herself into title contention. Maybe not the next title shot, but maybe at least the #1 contenders bout. Because if you had the Moroz win and then the Jessica Rakoczy win, let's not forget she was the runner-up on the Ultimate Fighter. This Letourneau shoots it way up the rankings.
Yeah, for sure. She's stringing together a good group of wins, and she can be very close. And this fight, it was really close. I agree 100%. It probably came down to that third. I think Letourneau just got the better of the significant strikes, I'd say. When she got rocked in that first, I think it kind of changed the outcome of this whole fight. And it's really strong win for her to double up, and Moroz kind of had some hype coming into this after the big upset she pulled. So it leaves a good spot for Letourneau in this division.
The only question mark for Letourneau, they mentioned that she has fought at usually bigger weight classes. Her conditioning has to have some work, because I felt that even though she had the power and whatnot, I kind of felt that if she was taking on some of these other girls that we've seen just keep on going, Joanna, Paige Van Zant, Carla Esparza, I mean, just to name a few, even Aguilar has great conditioning, even though she lost to Gadella. That's something obviously she'll have to work on. Her size and power is evident. That's there. But she may have to kind of tighten up the conditioning a little bit. That'd be my, or at least maybe have a better weight cut, which helps I'm not sure if it's just simply she has bad conditioning. If her weight cut's severe, maybe just kind of refining the weight cut.
Yeah, 100%. Because in the top end of that division, most of those girls can just go all day at a crazy pace. So you have to have that to live in the top of that division.
Next fight of the evening in the lightweight division, Olivier Aubin-Mercier against Tony Sims. Tony Sims took this fight on short notice. Give him a lot of credibility. I think he did pretty good for a guy mostly known as a striker against a very strong grappler in Aubin-Mercier, but wasn't quite good enough to stop the takedowns. He got taken down 6 times out of 10 attempts, got outstruck 76-46, and really, besides not getting submitted, we didn't really see that stand-up prowess that we had seen in his previous fight. Again, I give him all the credit in the world, but he's obviously going to go back to the gym and work on his grappling because it's obviously not up to par to OAM.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much even to say about this fight. I think I read that OAM landed 3 significant strikes the whole fight, and he just it was just too much.
that is correct. He landed one around if he averaged that.
Yeah, so he was just way too strong in the control for Tony Sims. Props to him for taking on short notice, but he did what he normally does. He controlled them, didn't do too much, but enough to get by and get the win.
Now, for Olivier, there's a couple things. One, he definitely needs to step up in competition because he's obviously been dominating guys with his grappling. So maybe another good experienced grappler. And 2, fighting outside of Canada. That's what I would say for him coming up next. Those are the 2 things that need to happen for me to say this guy is a legit, up and coming guy.
Yeah, and I think they'll have to match him up with someone that maybe he can't take down and see what he can do with the striking.
All right, the next fight of the evening, boy, what a performance here by the Brazilian as Francisco Trinaldo took on former Tough Nations winner Chad Laprise. And did I expect Trinaldo to win? Yes, that's why I picked him. But did I expect him to knock out Chad in the first round? No, I did not. He caught him kind of circling around, caught him with a straight left, dropped him, and then just went right in for the kill in the first round. Gets the stoppage officially at the 2:43 marker, and this is a huge win for Trinaldo. If, like I said, this guy already had 10 fights in the UFC, you might think, man, how did this guy already have 10 fights? He was on 3-fight winning streak, takes out a notable guy, former Ultimate Fighter winner. This is a huge win for Francisco Trinaldo. Look, Chris, knocks out the guy in the first round. definitely he gets a step up in competition. I mean, I don't know if he gets championship level guys or ever gets to that level, but he's definitely proved that every time we've seen him in these last couple fights, he has gotten better. And this was kind of the cherry on the cake as far as his last few efforts.
Yeah, I really expected him to come out strong. I mean, we both picked him, and I thought he'd get the win. I knew we talked about it too that he'd have the more power in the striking, but I didn't think it'd be that early. And I don't want to say easy, but he got it done better than I thought he would. So he for sure needs to get someone maybe in the back of that top 15, top 10 area, but I don't know how far he can go, but he definitely deserves a fight up there.
Well, for Laprise, I just want to go over this real quickly. I think he kind of learned. I hope he learned something in this fight. That maybe his slow, methodical pace isn't always the best one. And he has to maybe add. I hate to say get more power. That's hard to do, but maybe throw a little harder. I don't know. There just a little tune up. Even though he lost, it's really other than getting caught with the straight left and getting finished. It was pretty even up until kind of that point. I don't think he's that far behind Trinaldo, but there are a couple things that he'll have to tighten up again. Much like Olivier, I'd like to see him fight out of Canada for once, just to get out of his comfort zone. But I still think he's a pretty intriguing guy at 155.
Yeah, he definitely could be, and I'm sure he will come back better to this. I think maybe if you're gonna sit there and just trade with guys like that, and you don't have the advantage in power, I like to see more output, keep a little more pressure, hands in their face, something like that.
Next fight of the evening was in the welterweight division as former middleweight top contender Patrick Cote took on Josh Berkman, the former World Series of Fighting champion. And boy, this one was just a straight up brawl. I mean, there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about this. This was just two guys swinging hard. Cote did try to mix in some takedowns. He was 0 for 4 on them. Berkman did land one, didn't do much with it. But other than that, Berkman definitely better than his last two efforts here in the UFC. The thing that kind of hurt was he was looking kind of exclusively to counter, and I think that was one of the reasons that led to his downfall here, Billy, even though he was landing powerful shots and did definitely rock Cote. But when you're getting outstruck basically 2-1, looking at the final stats, Cote had 106 landed strikes to just 49 by Berkman. You're placing a lot of effort on one shot, and I think that was kind of the downfall. The accumulations of the shot mixed with Cote already being a very powerful dude, especially in the welterweight division, I think it finally kind of caught up with Berkman there in that third round, and thus why Cote was able to get the knockout and get the finish. Definitely a great fight, deserving of being the fight of the night. And I think with that performance, even though he lost, Billy, I think Berkman sticks around at least for one more fight in the second stint with the UFC. But another big win for Patrick Cote. He's now won 5 out of his last 6 fights here in the welterweight division. And I think he's starting to finally put everything together, Patrick Cote. I mean, you add in his great striking, his improved grappling, and his already granite chin. He's a scary dude to face in this welterweight division.
Yeah, and for Berkman, I was really surprised. I think he came out a lot better than I expected compared to his last two, and his counter striking was on. He landed some shots, and but Cote, he put more output on him. He landed the harder. I mean, he landed like a classic Hendo bomb, I think, in that first round. That I was amazed Berkman even stayed alive there, and he ended up finishing him in the third. But yeah, there wasn't. They both just swung for it. Great fight, went back and forth. Berkman definitely deserves another fight in the UFC. I think he looked good out there, and Cote is moving forward to maybe be a threat in the division again.
Co-main events of the evening, Neil Magny against Eric Silva, also in the welterweight division. And Billy, when we were breaking down this fight, I said if Eric Silva wants to win, he needs to come out on fire and really pressure Neil Magny in that first round, get in his face, make him feel uncomfortable. And that's not what Eric Silva did. Eric Silva sat back, threw some leg kicks, threw some jabs, even tried a couple of takedowns to possibly out jiu-jitsu him. Did get a takedown in the first round, however, and I think that made that his takedowns overall in the fight, landing 3 of his 4 attempts, I think made the fight pretty interesting. But Magny also had 4 takedowns of his own to kind of counteract that. Looking at the striking, I think because he was worried about the takedown / tired / going for his own takedowns, he got outstruck 132-37 in this fight en route to what somehow was a split decision victory. I thought this was clearly 30-27 Neil Magny, or at the very least 29-28 Magny, with maybe Silva getting the first round due to his control with that takedown. But really, other than that first round, Billy, like I said, Silva sat back, and when you're going to sit back and be at range against our former co-host Dave Sadler likes to call the Grim Reacher, you're not going to beat this guy. It's been proven. You're just not going to beat him. And Eric Silva pretty much played right into the hands of Neil Magny.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like Eric Silva already has a problem with cardio, and Neil Magny just stayed in his face. I don't know how many jabs he threw in his face, but I was super impressed. He really kept him back with that jab, mixed in with that uppercut, and yeah, I was a little worried in the beginning of this fight. I think in the first round, Silva took him down, and I was like, all right, he's no Damian Maia, but he's gonna look good. But then I think Magny came back and actually took his back in one round and showed that he can hang there and outstruck him a ton. So this is a huge win to get back from Magny, and I'm really happy he could do it so fast.
Now, because of that, we may not see Neil Magny fight as quick. I have a feeling he's going to fight one more this year, though. Just the pace that he goes on, that's my feeling, but probably not till December, I would imagine. I'm trying to think. I know it seems obvious just because he fought on the same card, but I honestly think a Neil Magny Patrick Cote would be a tremendous fight.
Yeah, that'd be. I really want to see Magnus get a huge fight though. I don't. He's been doing it on such a huge long win streak. He took a small loss to Damian Maia, who I don't know what he's ranked. What is he? 5? He's up there, and then he comes back and beats Eric Silva this quick. So I kind of want to see him to get a really big fight.
How about another guy I was thinking of, another kind of younger guy in the welterweight division, Stephen Thompson?
That I'd like, because Stephen Thompson has a lot of hype around him right now. He's been destroyed. What Ellenberger was that?
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be a really good fight.
And then my last option would be Gunnar Nelson.
That'd probably be even better.
Those would be my top 3 for
Yeah,
Neil Magny.
Thompson or Gunnar, I think, would be perfect matchups. I don't know. Did Gunnar already get booked, or were they trying to get him on that Dublin card?
I think they were trying to, but it didn't seem like it was going to work out. I think the fact that they already named Stipe against Rothwell as the co-main event, they might want to save him for one of those other fight nights because he is a bigger name. He's already main evented a card himself, and they maybe don't want to take like the onus off of him. So he'll probably be on something. He might end up getting added to one of these pay-per-view main cards coming up here.
Yeah, I could see that. I guess that makes sense. I was kind of hoping you got in that Dublin card, then we get to see Magny a little sooner again.
Right. All right, let's get to the main event of the evening, or lack thereof, as Max Holloway took on Charles Oliveira. Big fight in the featherweight division, and didn't really go as planned. Both guys were kind of throwing strikes. Holloway landed a few more than Oliveira. Oliveira shoots in for a takedown, goes up against the cage. Max Holloway is able to stop it, and as Holloway's disengaging, you see Oliveira kind of grab his kind of collarbone, shoulder area, and Max Holloway got in one to the body before the referee stopped in and realized that Oliveira's hurt. He can't continue. Initial reports, he already said that his neck and shoulder kind of hurt during training, but he felt he was good enough to fight. Obviously, that injury came back very quickly after trying that takedown. Also, he said he may have had a torn esophagus. It looks as though that wasn't quite the case if you look at some different articles, but he definitely did get hurt. Still, I believe it's undisclosed, Billy, how long he will be out, but I wouldn't be surprised if he probably doesn't fight again this year. That's kind of what I'm thinking, that he may return to training this year, but I don't think he'll be able to get a fight booked, and that may not allow a rematch between these two, which is deserving to take place, as they may have Max booked for someone else.
At first, I didn't think that, but then they booked that Mendez Frankie fight, and unless they give Holloway like Stevens, I don't know who else they give him, and who knows if Oliveira, this was just a crazy weird thing that stopped this fight, and he can go right back to training next week. I'm not sure the extent, because they're saying there's no like major injuries or anything, so maybe they could book a rematch real soon in the next couple months. But other than that, I'm not really sure who they're going to book against Holloway now.
Yeah, Jeremy Stevens is definitely, if you look at guys like on a winning streak, I don't know about winning streak, but I guess one fight, but he's the only other guy in the top that is currently coming off a win, especially when you look at Lamas is already booked against Diego Sanchez coming up. And then obviously, like I said, they just booked Frankie Edgar and his Chad Mendez going to be the main event of the Tough 22 finale. Of course, we all know McGregor is going to fight Aldo. Well, you know what? I just thought about it, Billy. If Faber stays at 45, they could do Faber versus Holloway.
Yeah, that would. Whew, I didn't know if Faber's going to stay there, but after the Ultimate Fighter and everything, that's a great matchup because he's going to need a fight.
And that could be added to the main card or the main event prelims on Fox Sports 1 or whatever the case may be for the 194 card the next day after the Ultimate Fighter finale. So that could be a possibility too. I know people aren't talking about it, but obviously with Faber not fighting his coaching counterpart, Conor McGregor, he's got to fight somebody. And I would say if Max Holloway can get a guy the caliber of Uriah Faber and beat him, that's definitely a big feat.
Yeah, that'd be huge. That'd be a big fight. I'm not sure where Faber's staying, but I kind of actually hope that works out because that'd be a great fight. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Max Holloway jump on one of those cards real soon. He seemed like he really wanted to get out there and make a statement. So comes out of this fight with very little damage or nothing barely happened. So I think we will see him in the next 3 months. He'll probably jump in maybe if someone drops out injured or something. You never know.
One thing I did want to mention before we get to fan questions here and we finish our recap of Saskatoon was Mirko Krokop will return in action to the UFC. Not the UFC Japan card like I thought, Billy, but he will still be fighting in Asia. He's going to be fighting on the UFC Fight Night Korea card, first time the UFC invades the country of Korea. He's going to be taking on Anthony Hamilton. Also, the main event for that card has been announced as we thought he would be fighting on the card, Billy. Ben Henderson, who is half Korean, will be fighting on the card. And we weren't sure the weight class or the possible opponent, but he's sticking with 170, and he's going to be taking on Thiago Alves in the main event for that Fight Pass card.
That's a crazy fight right there. That whole card is shaping up to be really nice for a Fight Pass card. I mean, Benson and Thiago is about as good as a Fight Pass main event you can ask for.
Also, Deung-Hun Kim will also be fighting on the card as well. Of course, the most successful fighter probably from Korea. Talk has been that the Korean Zombie wants to get at least a temporary leave from the Korean military to fight on this card. I don't think that's going to happen, but the fact it's in his home country, it would be nice if the military did kind of let him, give him a little bit of a reprieve to train since he's not leaving the country, so to speak. That would be kind of nice, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I would really hope it could, but yeah, it's just one of those things. You never know how they're going to let him.
And also, I don't know if anyone else, I wouldn't be surprised if Gomi somehow shows up on this card.
I kind of just want Gomi to retire. I'm sorry, but I can't see any more Gomi.
Well, again, just to recap, Charles Oliveira, real quickly, looking at an MMA Junkie article, he was released from the hospital yesterday, and he was negative for any serious injuries. He did have a micro tear in his esophagus, and he has a 5-day waiting period before he can consider surgery, and also any test for his chest, neck, and throat were all negative. So it looks as though the injury wasn't as serious, maybe as previously noted, but he obviously did feel that he was hurt enough to not continue in that fight. So we'll see if he actually requires surgery. So he may be out not as long as maybe I initially thought, but just maybe being cautious is what keeps him on the sideline more than actually like being hurt.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I hope it's nothing too serious. Maybe he sits out for a month or so, and then books something and gets it going because he's a for sure serious contender, and it was sad to see that main event end that way.
All right, well, let's get to our fan questions, our next round of fan questions here on Beyond the Cage. They were submitted to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. I'd like to thank everybody that sent in questions and also liked the page. And as people know, we'll be giving away some stuff Our 3 favorite questions will win some prizes, an autograph photo from Sam Alvey and Jessica I, and also a mystery pack of UFC cards will be given away to our 3 favorite questions here this afternoon. So for the winners, which we'll announce here at the end after answering all the questions, you'll be notified via Facebook message. And if you don't respond to our message within 24 hours, we will pick another person who asked questions to receive a prize. So, all right, let's get on to questions here. First question submitted from Dan M. He wants to know, why the hell did Holly Holm jump to the front of the line? I haven't been too impressed by her performances. Well, this is a question that basically says, why did the UFC pick Holly Holm over someone else? And the question is new opponent, new intrigue, and potentially more fan interest. That is, to me, why she jumped the line, because she really wasn't that deserving. She had 2 decisions. The first one, you can make a case that she lost or that was a draw against Raquel Pennington. It's more or less it's the best striker in the division, or however you want to however they want to build up the fight. It's a new challenge, and that's really why she jumps to the front of the line over some of these other girls.
Yeah, it's really just a fresh face for Rousey to go after, but I honestly don't like it. I think if you would have spent more time building up Holly Holm, maybe you have a chance. But if you want a fresh face, I think Nunes has looked a lot better, and I think more dominant, at least in her recent performances. So I really think she deserved that title shot. And there's a fresh face for the UFC, but I guess there's more a little hype around Holm, so I guess it sells more tickets. We'll see.
Well, of course, I think just about everyone is agreeing that Holm should have had one more fight before getting the title shot. And believe it or not, most people were on board with a Misha Ronda 3, despite Ronda being 0-2. So that's another thing. I think people saw what Misha was doing and realized, like, well, that's not a bad option. So that's the matchup they're going right now, and we'll see how it all plays out January 2nd. Next question. Thanks for the question, though, Dan. Next question, Matt M. He asked, as Bellator picks up more UFC cast-offs, is their talent level as a company getting better? Also, can or should Tito Ortiz be a main event fighter? I'll let you go first on this one, Billy.
I don't think it really makes their talent level better. I mean, a little bit. They're for sure picking up people that are going to compete with everyone in there. And I think it does more for their new up-and-coming fighters to say, all right, I get to fight this big UFC guy. It more establishes them or something. But I don't know about much making it that. I mean, it's making it better, but not in like the grand scheme to go after the UFC, because they're just getting people on their downfall. They need to get more up-and-coming stars. And then Tito, fighting for a title fight, no, but as you can see with the the Bonner fight, how big it was. So he can for sure be a main event and people are going to watch. So it depends on how you want to look at it. Fighting for the title, I don't so much agree with it, but that's what they're going to do. The fans are going to watch.
Now, since I've been watching Bellator, which has been quite a few years now, all these guys that have been labeled, whether they've been for one-off fights or actually competing solidly in the division, none of these so-called UFC cast-offs, as Matt put it, have won a title in Bellator.
Yeah.
As far as I know, no Bellator champion has previously fought in the UFC, as far as I know. And if they did, it wasn't of any lasting impact to go, oh, that guy was fought in the UFC for quite a bit. All those guys have lost. You look at Chet Congo, Ben Saunders, Josh Neer, all those big names that they have brought in. And even the one big name, Shinya Aoki, he got destroyed by Eddie Alvarez. I mean, most of these guys they brought in have not won. I know King Mo wasn't technically a UFC cast-off, but he was about to be in the UFC after the Strikeforce thing, but the whole steroids thing kind of nixed him going to the UFC from Strikeforce, and obviously he's been a bust. Rampage wasn't interested really in fighting for the title. He probably could have been their champion. He probably was the closest to being one. Kendall Grove lost his title shot. I mean, unless Tito beats Lena McGarry, he'll be the only one. And it kind of won't mean much, really. So I would say that's not, like you said, their best talent has come from guys we've never heard of. That's what Bellator has to try to do is beat the UFC to the punch, signing these young prospects. And they're not going to get better by signing guys that the UFC gets rid of because either they're not good or they wanted too much money. That's not how they're going to do. And that's kind of why World Series of Fighting doesn't have a deep talent pool, because they've really gone after the former UFC guys and they're paying them a lot of money. And that's one of the reasons why they're in financial trouble. Where Bellator has done better, even under Bjorn Rebney and now Scott Coker. Yeah, they're dishing out talent and doing things like Shamrock and Kimbo. Don't get me wrong, they're doing some novelty things to draw in viewers, but they're also they've developed a lot better talent base outside of the big names than World Series of Fighting has, and that's why Bellator has been able to stay around.
Yeah, that's 100% correct too. I mean, like the best thing these UFC guys do is really show their young talent. Like, oh, you got to win over this UFC fighter, and it kind of puts that stamp on their name. But I think some of their best guys ever. I mean, Liam McGeary, I love Michael Page, up and comer. These are just guys that they picked up first.
Now, as far as Tito Ortiz being a main event fighter, as far as talent-wise, no, he's not a main event fighter. But in terms of name and prestige, he is a main event fighter. His fight against Stephan Bonner, again, not a huge star, really, other than having that fight with Forrest Griffin, hadn't done anything in MMA. If you really look at it, he hadn't. So for that fight to be the biggest fight on TV last year, as far as ratings, is damn impressive. So obviously people are still drawn to Tito Ortiz. So until people are no longer drawn to him, and that's either by him losing bad or just having bad performances, Bellator is going to keep running him out there as a main event fighter. And I don't blame them. If he's getting ratings, why would you not have him as your main event fighter?
Yeah. Everyone's going to watch Tito fight. It's no question.
All right, thanks for the question, Matt. Let's get to the next one. Ryan D. He writes in, with Bellator and World Series of Fighting announcing a one-night tournament, do you think the UFC will follow suit? Obviously, the UFC started as one-night tournaments, so technically they've already done one, but not in a very long time. And because of that and the things they had to do to change their organization and get the sport continuing, get their organization continuing and get out of bankruptcy, they will never do a one-night tournament. It's never going to happen. And if they ever do a tournament, which I think they should at some point, just to change things up. It'd be cool to do like a Pride Grand Prix situation every year, a different weight class or something. But it would be more of a Bellator type thing where 3 fights in 3 months or, a couple fights over 6 months or something like that. It's never going to be a one-night tournament with the UFC. And again, if it is these other organizations, I believe the World Series of Fighting one, Bill, you were saying they tried to do it up in Washington, but I guess the commission and criminal law there said that would have been considered a felony for those guys to participate in that many fights in one night. So their plans of a one-night tournament, at least delayed in the state of Washington. Whether or not they choose another country and or state is yet to be determined, but their one-night tournament event is looking to be kind of on the rocks.
Yeah, it's never gonna. The only way it'll ever happen is if it works for these guys and it's so successful that they're just blowing up because everyone wants to watch these one-night tournaments again. And then if they really start closing that gap, which this is all super hypothetical, probably will never happen. Even though it's interesting, it's not going to get that big. And then UFC is like, all right, maybe we have to go back to this, but it'll never happen.
I mean, the Bellator is doing, again, kind of a novelty. It's interesting and maybe fun, but I don't think it's something you can do that often. And I just think it's such a tough thing to prepare for, because how much do you really put into that first fight, knowing that if you get past it, you got to do it? I just think that's too much. No other sport you would have to worry about that, like playing a game right for playing a game. I just think it's not very smart and could end up being dangerous. I'd much rather see a tournament where it's like 3 fights in 3 months, at least for the UFC. And for Bellator doing it one time, kind of like this, changing the rounds a little bit, I don't mind it, but it's something that I don't think you can go to too often.
The Bellator one's a little smaller too. When you get into the 8-man ones, that's a little crazy. That's a lot.
4-man. And whether it's like 2 3-minute rounds or something, or through like 3 3-minute rounds, they're trying to limit the impact. Might not be as bad, but yeah, I don't think it's something you can do too often.
Yeah.
Good question though. Thanks for writing in, Ryan. Our next question comes from Michael J. Who, in your opinion, is the brightest prospect signed to the UFC? I do actually like this question. This is a tough one because prospect in the UFC is kind of hard to judge because a guy could have a lot of fights but have never fought in the UFC before, but it's hard to consider him like a prospect. Like you look at someone like Jordan Meehan, this guy has over 30 fights. Is he really a prospect? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And Conor McGregor, I would still say, is relatively young in his career. I mean, only 25 years old, less than 20 fights, but he's already gotten so high in his level. Is he really a prospect anymore? Same thing with Max Holloway. Yeah, he's the youngest guy to 10 wins in the UFC, but having already fought 13 times in the UFC, is he really a prospect anymore? And that's kind of the thing for me. It's really hard to judge who's a prospect. I try to say someone under 5 UFC fights, and definitely maybe under 26, 27 years old. But kind of looking at that, maybe we're a little biased here, and I think because we've interviewed him, I think Johnny Case is a very brave prospect in the UFC's 155 division. The kid has looked great so far in his 3 UFC fights. I think he's definitely up there. As far as the female divisions, I would say, I know she lost that first fight, but I think because she came out of nowhere, I actually think that Courtney Casey, who fought Joanne Calderwood, going back on the Scotland card, I think can do some things in this division. I would consider her kind of an up-and-coming fighter as well. And I'm trying to think of one more here. Kind of scratching my head here. Those are 2 that I can think of. I was trying to do some research and whatnot, but those are 2 I definitely think have a lot of potential.
I really like the what was the young kid that fought on the Mexico card? Yair Rodriguez. He's only had a couple of fights in the UFC. I really like him a lot. He was really exciting. That's the main one that pops out of my head, honestly, because I would still, if you ask this question, even like before the Mendez fight, you'd have to say someone with McGregor. He's still relatively so new, but he's already so big in a title. It's kind of, you can't really call him that, but yeah, there's a lot of little names out there. Yair Rodriguez is one that steps out to me. He's really young. I want to say Max Holloway, but he's had way too many UFC wins, like you said, but he's only 23, so his potential is limitless.
Boy, I'm forgetting Henry Cejudo for the flyweight division. I would say is probably one as well.
I like that Braveheart kid. He's looked pretty impressive.
Oh, Stevie Ray?
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys look at. Great question, Mike. Thanks for writing in. Next question, David K. If he signs with the UFC, who would you like to see Fedor fight? Mirko Cro Cop.
Yeah, Cro Cop. I stole my answer, but Cro Cop. No one else.
I don't think it's a question. It's
Yeah, Fedor is not going to compete with the top 5 of the UFC or whatever. He just wants a big fight. They might as well do one of those Bellator type events. Who's not going to want to see Fedor Cro Cop?
The only other guy, and I think it would be a detriment, especially if he wins coming up against Frank Mir, would be Orlovsky. And Orlovsky wants it, but here's the thing. I guess if Orlovsky, if that's his like number one goal is to fight Fedor, it's hard for the UFC to like stop him. But it's hard for me to say, if you're Andrei Arlovsky, you're 36 years old, going on 37. Would you rather fight for the title again, possibly, come back, be champion, maybe even retire, or fight Fedor? Oh, sure, it was a loss, avenge that loss, but if you lose your shot at the title, and maybe you don't recover from that. You don't have that much time left. Your body can only take so much more training and preparation and grinding and stuff. You kind of want to waste that time fighting Fedor. I hate to say waste, but I guess if he loses to Frank Mir, it changes my mind. If he loses to Frank Mir, go for it. But if he beats Frank Mir, I don't know. I just feel like I think you're derailing yourself. I think going for the title and losing, I think, is a lot more noble than fighting a guy coming off a 3-year layoff.
Yeah, I honestly thought Arlovsky deserved a shot after the Brown win. So if I don't even like the Frank Mir fight, honestly, and I think for both of them, they're kind of resurging. I don't want to see that fight, but I don't know. Like you said, if he loses that Mir fight, for sure, I'd love to see it. if he wins it and then says he wants to go on and fight him, I think it's sort of a waste of his time when he could probably get a title shot if he really tried for it.
Thanks for the question, though, David. Next question. Trent C. writes in, of the remaining fights in 2015, which ones are you most excited about? I'm going to try to keep it to just 3, but I think the Joanna Jacek fight against Claudia Gadelha, I'm very interested in seeing, because so far in the UFC, that's the only close fight she's had. That's the only girl who's been able to come close to beating her. And yes, that was a very close fight. In fact, I thought Gadelha may have won that fight. So very intriguing, especially when you look at how well Gadelha performed against a great striker in Aguilar, how she was able to dominate Aguilar in that fight at UFC 190. So very intriguing fight. I'm very excited for that one. As far as like title fights, I think the title fight I'm most, besides that one, I guess that is a title fight. Besides that one, really interested in the Robbie Lawler and Carlos Condit fight, 2 of my favorite fighters of all time. So very interested in seeing that one. And boy, my third, I'm going to go with one more. Billy, go to yours while I think of my third excited fight here.
For me, bar none, Conor Aldo is like, everyone needs to see that fight. So that's like my top right now. And then it just got booked, but Mendez Edgar, I'm really excited for. That's going to be a great fight. I'm interested to see Diego's debut at 145 versus Lamas. That's going to be a great fight. There's a lot of little fights, but as far as big fights, yeah, Conor Aldo is just that we have to see that fight. It's going to be great no matter what, and that's the top.
I'll go Conor Aldo too. I'll be my third one. I'll go that one.
Just something about that you can't. And then
actually, you know what? Never mind. No. I just forgot. I got announced. Strike that. JDS Overeem. I'm sorry. JDS Overeem.
I was gonna say, I was surprised you didn't go with that one. You've been wanting that fight forever. Finally got booked.
It just was announced yesterday. Give me a break.
But
JDS Overeem.
Even the other fight on that card, Diaz Johnson, that's gonna be a really good fight. There's so many good fights booked.
Thanks for the question, though, Trent. Good question. Randy B., why was Tate overlooked for Holm to fight Ronda? We kind of mentioned that earlier. I think it had more to do with the UFC picking a new challenger, trying to build up a new contender, more so than it had anything to do with Misha. I was actually on board with Tate Ronda 3. I was not that opposed to it, to be quite honest. I mean, you look at the 4 wins she's had against top girls in Liz Carmouche, Jessica Ai, and Sarah McMahon. Add in, she had the first ever like big female fight in Japan taking on Rin Nakai. I know that's not a huge win, but she got the job done, 4 wins in a row. It was kind of hard to deny her a shot. So I was actually on board with it, but I think it was just the UFC wanting to build up a new contender more so than anything else.
Yeah, it's a new contender. We already went over it, but it's the wrong contender.
Just, I think someone else actually asked who her next opponent should be, so we'll save our thoughts on who maybe Misha should take on instead. But thanks for the question there. That was Randy B. Tony C. checks in. The question that began the UFC, what is the greatest martial art? This is a tough question. I don't know if there's one that's greater than the other. I can maybe say what's my favorite. After seeing the styles in the cage and even seeing some regular competition itself, I think my favorite to watch in terms of an actual match, to be honest, is karate. That's my favorite to watch. I think jiu-jitsu is a close second for the chess match, but those would be kind of my 2 favorite, I guess bases you can call it. Wrestling has maybe been the most successful base, but I don't know if that's necessarily the greatest, but I would make a case. You could maybe make a case that wrestling's been maybe the greatest base so far, at least for championship wise.
Yeah, nowadays it's hard because you obviously you have to have a little bit of everything, especially if you want to be successful in the UFC. But if you just want to take them all apart and look one against the other, I kind of side towards jiu-jitsu because I used to think wrestling you can control where it's at. But if you have good wrestling but absolutely zero jiu-jitsu, you're going to get tore apart every time. Most jiu-jitsu guys can even pull guard and get strikers to the ground. So I like to think jiu-jitsu, but then when it gets to the elite level, it changes a little bit because obviously if you have wrestling and you know jiu-jitsu defense and stuff, But if you look at them just separately, like you only choose one, I like jiu-jitsu.
All right. Our thanks for the question, Tony. Our next question comes from Richard C. Another thing about kind of Holman Rousey, we kind of already answered that. Jeff B. Writes in, do you see Rousey versus Cyborg ever happening?
Nope.
If Ronda keeps rolling through people, it's got to happen, right? I mean, I feel like it's an eventuality. Unless Cyborg loses or gets caught on steroids again, that's the only way I see the fight not happening. But I mean, if she beats Holm, she beats Tate again. If she fights Jessica Eye or Amanda Nunes, beats them again, fights who am I missing here? Alexis Davis or Sarah Kaufman or Sarah McMahon or one of them again whoops their butts, or Kat Zingano. I mean, we're talking maybe 2 more years because she's fighting kind of averaging 3 fights a year. So right now she's obviously booked for January. So probably at least 2 more fights, 2, maybe 3. If she beats all those girls, it's kind of hard, and she still wants to fight. The UFC's got to find somebody, and why not Cyborg Santos?
I think it'll stall out too long, and that's why I don't think it'll ever happen. I think by then something will happen, whether it's the Cyborg losing or maybe even Rousey losing. But at 35, I don't think it'll never happen. I think Rousey needs to sit down with BJ Penn and understand, look, fight anyone, any way, anytime, move up and go after her.
That's what I mean. I think eventually something's got to give.
Yeah. I mean, when Rousey's been so dominant, why not, to prove a point, just move up? And you see so many people do. I mean, Anderson Silva moved up a little bit. BJ Penn, obviously they didn't go straight for the best. Well, BJ Penn did, but he's a different case. But yeah, I think she has to. I mean, she's cleared out this division and some.
All right, our next question comes in from Don A. It's kind of a 2-part question. He said, who would you like to see CM Punk take on in his debut? And will we ever get to see CM Punk against Jason David Frank, the man better known as the Green Ranger from the original Power Rangers show? I don't think Jason David Frank fights MMA anymore. He did for a time, but I think he's in his 40s now. I don't think he's fighting professionally anymore. I think he still does seminars, coaches, and trains, and obviously he's pretty heavily involved on the big convention circuit, signing autographs, as the Green Ranger. So I don't think we'll ever get CM Punk against Jason David Frank. That'd be interesting. It would have been cool to see him in the cage. I don't think we'll see the Green Ranger in the octagon, but that would have been a pretty cool matchup. But as far as CM Punk goes, he's technically listed as a middleweight on the UFC roster. I think he could very easily probably fight at welterweight, but maybe trying to stay with the weight cut here. And man, it is tough to pick, but because you don't want to pick someone too good that is just going to beat him real quickly. But I honestly think it's going to be someone who's not even signed to the UFC yet. I think it's someone that's not even on the roster. That would be my guess.
If they want to do it right, yeah, they need to treat it like that and really build them up. To be honest, I put this whole thing to the side because I really didn't care too much about it. And I didn't even know what weight he was till just now, really. I think on Anderson Silva's return, you give him CM Punk and you call it a night. I mean, I don't really know. It's not going to be no one big. I don't really care that much. I don't want to be mean about it, but I don't really like the idea that he's even fighting. He's never had a history, so if you give him anyone decently good, I think he'll get torn apart.
What do you think about the Green Ranger?
The Green Ranger, I mean, I don't think we ever will. I don't know how old that dude is, but if it does happen, that might actually be a reasonable first fight for him, to be honest. There's his debut fight, Jason David Frank.
I don't think it'll be the Green Ranger. I'm saying this as a fan of the Green Ranger. Let's not get this twisted. Everyone knows the Green Ranger was the best, and then he eventually turned to the White Ranger, was even cooler. So, all right, let's get to our. Thanks for the question, though, Don. Our next question comes from Hector C. If John Jones returns, do you think Chris Weidman will fight him or could defeat him? Yes and yes. I don't think it's going to be the first fight. I think John Jones' first fight coming back will be for the light heavyweight title, and then maybe later on, if one of them loses the title or if they have a couple more dominant wins, maybe we see a big super fight between the two. But I honestly think eventually Chris Weidman will probably move up to 205 and will probably cross paths with John Jones, and I think he could beat John Jones. Again, do I think that's going to happen soon? No, but in 5 years, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Weidman wants it really bad, and he will fight John Jones. But I mean, could he defeat him? Yeah, it's MMA. Would I ever bet on him? No. I don't see what Chris Weidman has to stop John Jones or change it, especially moving up to 205 when John Jones is trouble for anyone being that big. I mean, anyone he's fought that could have been a potential middleweight, he's just destroyed. So I would never bet on him, but I think the fight will happen one day, and we'll see how it turns out then. You never know in the future.
Our next question comes to us from Lawrence T. Writes in, will Ronda fight again, and do you agree that she is one of the best fighters in the world? Yes, and yes. In fact, she already has a fight book. So that would be mean, Lawrence, but kind of double check your facts on that. I don't know what you really wanted us to say to that one.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if does he agree she's one of the world's best, like grouped in with men and everything, like people are separating it? I don't know, but yeah, yes, she's one of the best for sure, and she's already booked a fight.
All right, Kevin L. writes in, do you think anyone will ever take Ronda's belt? I mean, statistically, someone's got to eventually, I guess. I mean, Anderson Silva lost eventually, right? And I didn't think anyone was going to beat him. Fedor for years, nobody beat, eventually someone's going to beat her. Unless she gets out at kind of the right time, like a GSP scenario, and she retires before someone maybe gets that chance. I would say that may be more likely than her actually losing and sticking around long enough, is that she maybe has a couple more fights and decides, you know what, I've gotten to be the best. It's time to take on a new endeavor. And I think that may be the way Ronda Rousey's career plays out.
Yeah, it all depends on her. If she wants to fight till 38 like Silva, eventually someone's going to beat her. And these girls are only going to get better and better with how big she is. But I honestly, I think if she plays it smart, she maybe clears out this division a little more. I mean, what's left of it, takes a big cyborg fight and then calls it a career for her. I mean, she's done so much and then some. I think it'd leave a lot more open space for new talent to come up too.
Rail C writes in, based on the current fight card of Lawler and Condit, and obviously they added Hunt versus Bigfoot, do you think this card in Australia can surpass the UFC attendance record? Absolutely. Believe it or not, they've been going to Australia for, 5 years now? Close to it. And they've never had a title fight in Australia. They finally have one. And they're getting a tremendous matchup in Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit. Not to mention, we're having a rematch of arguably the greatest heavyweight fight of all time between Mark Hunt and Bigfoot Silva. Not to mention the other big fights that are on this card. I think absolutely they can sell out that at the Dodd Stadium and break the attendance record from Rogers Center. I absolutely think they can do it.
Yeah, I would hope so. This card is definitely deserving of it. Like, if they did it anywhere else, I think it deserves it. But I don't know if it will, to be honest. Lawler and Connor's really good. They just don't have that. It's no Conor Aldo, basically, I should say, as far as star power right now. And it deserves it as a fight fan. If you look at this card, for sure. I just don't know if it actually will.
Well, I think it's not so much on the fights based on the last couple of fights in Australia have been fight pass, smaller events. They really weren't held in huge arenas, and they go to Australia at least once a year, but I wouldn't say they go there so much that the market's oversaturated. Now they're bringing the first title fight, this big stadium, Melbourne, I think the second biggest city after Sydney. I just think the fans are going to go crazy for it. They're going to eat it up regardless of who actually was the title fight, and I think they're going to pack that arena. I think it's going to be a cool event, and I think we're going to see and they're doing it the right time of year. You forget Southern Hemisphere. It's technically going to be the summer there in Australia, so they should get like perfect weather for it. So I think it's going to be I'm going to double check the attendance record here, but isn't it slightly over 40,000?
I think so. Was it a George fight? Could be wrong.
That was at the Rogers Center. Yeah, 55,000 for UFC 129. So that's a little more than I thought, but I think the stadium itself holds 50,000. The actual seats, that's not including the floor seats. So I think they got a shot. If they don't break it, it doesn't mean it's not a great event or it doesn't sell out, but I think it's got a shot.
Maybe. I mean, it's definitely a good event, and I think he'll do great. I don't think he'll break the record.
Thanks for the question, though, Raul. Thanks again. Matt L. writes in, based on the current challengers in the top divisions, which champ do you think has the best chance of losing their title? Oh, boy. Well, the one who's safe right now is Dillashaw. He doesn't have a fight book, so he would be the safest. Obviously, the next title fight is John Dodson against Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. So in terms of closest, Dodson would be, I think he's a viable candidate, but I think Mighty Mouse will win. Let's see, because it says who would lose first. Well, I actually think Honda has a very real chance of beating Robbie Lawler. I would say that's maybe more likely to me than the Dodson matchup. And as far as, you know, some of the other ones, I think Ronda will maintain. I think Joanna's going to maintain. I think, well, it won't happen first, but I honestly think, I know this is an early favorite, but I am favoring Cowboy against RDA. So I would say those would be my three. I think the other ones, I think Weidman's going to win. Like I said, Ronda and Joanna's going to win. And honestly, I don't know who they're going to throw at TJ, but I feel like TJ is going to win. And am I missing a division here?
Cormier.
Oh, Cormier, Gustafson, boy. And I think I would favor Cormier. I don't like Gustafson coming off a loss. I think that kind of that irks me, but I would favor Cormier. And then heavyweight, I honestly think Cain Velasquez non-altitude, it does make a difference. And Verdum may be at cause to lose, but I wouldn't put as higher as the other three that I mentioned first.
Yeah, I didn't really look at it just as much as like the next fight, but it said like the top challengers in their division. As far as that, I mean, I think Cormier's got a lot of people that actually maybe not a lot. He only has a few, I think. But you kind of say Aldo if you want to look at it technically. I mean, with McGregor, Mendez, Frankie Edgar, there's a lot of guys potential to take his belt. RDA has a crazy amount of guys at 55 that are coming after it that are going to be really good. Those would be the top two. And then I would say Cormier, if you want to look at it that way, because when Jones comes back, he's got to go after him too. So Jones, Gustafsson, all them, he has a lot of people to worry about. There's a couple divisions that I think the belt could be passed around. And yeah, even the welterweight. I don't know how I forgot that. There's so many good fighters at welterweight. And Lawler's been hitting his stride, but I think this Condit fight, I'm actually way early, but I kind of am picking Condit in that fight.
Last question comes from Fred G. Do you think Miesha Tate will fight Cyborg in her first fight at 35? I'm going to say no. I think Cyborg will try the Invicta thing again and get a fight in Invicta at 135. I don't think the UFC wants to bank on her missing weight against a high-profile opponent in the UFC, and it kind of ruins the whole deal. I really think they're going to tell her to try to make 35 in Invicta, and if she makes 35 in Invicta, then maybe Miesha will be her first UFC opponent. I guess maybe that's, you know, playing semantics a little bit on your question. So she may end up being her first UFC opponent, but it won't be her first fight at 35. So I guess kind of, but no.
Yeah, if Cyborg makes the weight, I don't think he'll be in the UFC because they're not even going to mess with it until she can. And then if she does make that weight and dominate someone at 35, her first fight will be Rousey. They're not going to waste no time trying to not sell that fight.
All right, thanks everybody for the questions. We're going to get down to our three favorite ones here and give away some prizes. We'll start with our third place question here. And actually, I got to say, I changed my mind. You know, when I first saw the questions, you know, not answering them, just kind of just seeing them like, oh, this one, this one, this one. But I kind of changed my mind a little bit. So, all right, I'm going to go. Billy concurred. We already talked before the show, but I did change one. But it was one we were already considering. So the third place question for the mystery pack of UFC cards, we're going to go to David K. And his question was, if he signed with the UFC, who would you like to see Fedor fight? And I like that because, like I said, I really wanted to see the matchup with Crow Cop. So I think that was a no-brainer. So we go with that one. Again, a lot of good questions, but we can only pick three. Our next question we're picking, this will be for the Sam Alvey signed photo. who, in your opinion, is the brightest prospect currently signed to the UFC? That came from Michael J. So you're going to get the sign 8x10 there of Smiling Sam Alvey. And our number one question, and a really good question from Matt L. Which champs do you think are at most in risk of losing their title? So that gets you the Jessica I signed 8x10. So thanks again to everyone that wrote in questions, and congrats to Matt, David, and Michael on being selected as winners for this round of contest giveaways. And we'll contact all three of you via Facebook message, and please provide a valid mailing address. We will mail those out to you as soon as we can. And thanks again for liking Beyond the Cage. We're probably going to do another contest. I already got some stuff lined up. So maybe next month or something we'll line up another contest, something similar to this. But thanks again for everybody that wrote in.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your questions, and it seemed to work out pretty good. Got a lot of good questions, and it was fun to answer them.
He is Big Shot Bill, a.k.a. Billy Brandt. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrand21. I'm your host at Jim Graham, and you can follow me on Twitter, as I mentioned, at Jim Graham. And one thing I want to mention, and we're trying to get on this show, Billy and I, there's a show, it's technically a comic book show. If you guys didn't know, we like comic books on this show as well, called Court of the Nerds. And they did this draft thing based on the best hand-to-hand fighters in comic book world right now, like DC and Marvel and stuff. And I reached out to them and said, hey, there's no better guy than me and Big Shot Bill to break down fights. And we love comic books. So if you want to talk about who's the best hand-to-hand fighters, you got to give us a shot at discussing this on your guys' show. So if you want to see us do that, discuss the best hand-to-hand fighters in another universe, the comic book universe, hit up Court of the Nerds podcast Facebook page. They got a cool website. It's a cool show if you like comic books as well. And tell them you got to let these guys on. So go annoy their Facebook page with requests. We're still working on it, but you know, if we get a couple people that say, hey, you got to have these guys on, that may swim. So we're working that out as well. But anything else to add before we end the show, Billy?
Thanks again for all the questions, and good show.
All right, I got one last thing here for MMA Signatures MMA Classic Expo coming up in October. I got to tell you what, if you're not going to go, you definitely want to get in the private signings that they got running on for the event. You can send in items and do it that way if you can attend. But the coolest thing I think they're doing so far, Billy, they're going to have like just about everybody from UFC 1, really short of Ken and Hoyce. They're getting everybody. They're going to have Gerard Gordeau, who was the runner-up to Hoyce. They're going to have Zane Frazier, who fought in the first UFC. They're going to have Art Jimerson, who fought in the first UFC. Art Davey, who co-founded the UFC. I think I'm missing two other guys there from the first UFC event. But they're going to be there. I think it's going to be like 5 fighters plus Art Davey. The first ever UFC, not to mention, you know, big legends like Dan Severn and Don Fry. You got Claudia Gadella's is going to be there, you know, up and comer, obviously now fighting for the title against Joanna. First strawweight champion Carla Esparza. So many names are going to be there. And like I said, if you can't attend in person in Syracuse, New York, you'll have an option to mail in and get some autographs as well. Mark Coleman, gosh. Really awesome. And the UFC 1 stuff I think is very cool because a lot of people might not know and remember that, but that's something you can look back on if you get some of those guys that are definitely going to truly be one of a kind.
Yeah, that's definitely if you have the opportunity to. And like you said, they have the way of doing it, getting your ticket online, right? I think you can just not even have to be there and still get your stuff signed. So they're doing a lot of cool things with that.
All right. Again, that's the MMA Classic Expo, or you can check out the MMA Signatures Facebook page run by our good friend, Mr. Hiller. So, all right, for Billy Brandt, I am Jim Graham. Thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast.